participating with to get out carbon monoxide alarms and to talk about carbon monoxide poisoning prevention and education. So thank you, Rochester, for hosting us as we launch this campaign. So today we're here to talk about something that's invisible, odorless, potentially deadly. So now we're in October. I'm not talking about the Invisible Man. I'm not talking about any monster that you might see or any horror movie that you might see. I'm talking about something that's real. We're talking about carbon monoxide, or CO. Every year, hundreds of people die from CO poisoning across the country, and many more are hospitalized. As we drive down and wake up today, there are 2 individuals hospitalized in northwest Minnesota who had exposure to carbon monoxide yesterday as they turned their furnace on. CO is a gas that's created when fuels such as natural gas, propane, gasoline, and even wood, when they burn and there's incomplete combustion. So I pause there and I want you to think about all the sources of heat that you use that utilize propane, natural gas, wood, gasoline. Every single one of those appliances has that potential of generating carbon monoxide. Because you can't see it, smell it, or taste it, carbon monoxide can build up to toxic and dangerous levels in your home or in any structure without someone realizing, and by then, it might be too late. That's why we're taking action. My office is distributing 2,500 CO alarms across 8 Minnesota communities, including the city of Rochester. And we've identified these communities as having populations that are at higher risk of exposure to carbon monoxide. We've also rolled out a statewide awareness campaign featuring different characters. So yes, very timely as we talk about all the monsters and the movies that you might see. But what we want people to understand is that those aren't the monsters that are going to kill you. Those aren't the monsters that are going to get you. It's that odorless, invisible gas, carbon monoxide. All of this is done in thanks to a grant from federal legislation named in memory of 2 Minnesotans, Zachary and Nicholas Burt, 2 young brothers who tragically lost their lives to carbon monoxide poisoning decades ago. We are joined today by their mother, Cheryl, who can share her powerful story.
Well, I'm here today to tell you the sad part of all of this. There's the pluses and the minuses. The pluses are that we are out here advocating for alarms in every home, because that is really the only way that you will know that you have this monster that is a killer in your home. So I'm going to talk about how the monster, silent killer, got my 2 youngest. The rest of my family, my husband, my older son, our 100-pound black lab, we were all severely poisoned to the point where you can't make a judgment call. You feel like you have the flu. This is a serious, serious poison that you want to say, oh God, I feel like crap. I'm really feeling, I've got a headache. I'm achy all over. I'm sleepy. I want to go to sleep. I have the flu. It's the worst thing you can do. We did not have a carbon monoxide alarm back in 1996 when this happened to my family. We were burning, we had a furnace on. We burned a fire in our downstairs fireplace for the first time. This was an old home that was new to us, but we did that, and we had a wood burning stove in the kitchen area that we supplemented for heat as well. But it was the first time we had a fire. We caused a downdraft into our homes, and that happens frequently. Don't be alarmed. Everybody has downdrafts, but if you have a working furnace, your downdraft is not going to kill you. And you have fresh air intakes. There's all these things that you have in place. Had we had one of these alarms, we maybe beforehand would have seen some numbers on here that would have lit up and let us know that, hey, you've got like a level going on in your house. You might want to figure that out. And then when it got high enough, parts per million got high enough, that alarm would have went off and we'd know, hey, danger, get out. Instead, we were living with a lower level carbon monoxide all the time, and it was only for, let's say we turned our furnace on maybe the end of October, and our incident happened in January. We were sick. Me and my 3 children, stay-at-home mom, me and my 3 children were home all the time, and I had a sinus headache the whole time. I mean, I couldn't even, like, sometimes just talking hurt. And we'd be to the doctor. My kids would be lethargic when they would wake up. They would be cranky, ornery, slow to wake up, if even. And then I would be that hypochondriac mom who would call in and say, look, something's wrong with my kids this morning. I need to come in. And they'd be like, oh, God, it's her again. Well, you can bring them in. We don't have an appointment, but you can bring them in. So bundle up my 3 little children, ages 16 months, 4 years old, or just turned 4 like in December, so he wasn't even 4, and then Ryan was 5. Bundle them up, drive them 25 minutes into St. Cloud, and we get in their waiting room, and by that time, enough ambient air, you know, fresh air getting to them, they would be playing in the toy area waiting, right? And then the doctors would see them and they'd be like, doesn't really see anything wrong. Maybe a little ear infection on the baby, but my kids never had ear infections, but there was nothing wrong. They'd send us home. I'd maybe get another antibiotic for my sinuses, trying to knock that pain out. And that happened over and over and over again. I was labeled a hypochondriac mom. Because I was doing that frequently. My husband was so mad at me for all the co-pays and deductibles that I was racking up, but I'm like, you guys don't see them in the morning. It is not normal to see them like that and to see me like that. Anyway, on the night of January 5th or 6th, it depends on how you look at it, but that evening, 1996, was one of the coldest days that Kimball, Minnesota had. It was like 30 below, winds were blowing. My husband came home from work, and I had a half-baked meal for dinner and thought, okay, that day had been pretty good. I had been out. Ryan, my oldest, went to all day, every other day kindergarten. And then Nick, who was turning 4, wanted so badly to be like his brother going to school that I enrolled him in the room right next door of kindergarten. They had a little half-day preschool thing. And so that morning, I took Zachary, my 16-month-old, into the doctor, and because he was all out of sorts. And he says, oh, he's got a double ear infection, I guess. Let's try another antibiotic. And I did $250 of grocery shopping back in 1996. That's a lot of grocery shopping. That's a lot of groceries. And so I thought, okay, I'm feeling good. I did some laundry. I put all those things away because we were out in the community. That night, I guess my husband came home and he wanted to build a fire downstairs because it was so cold, and he wanted to play Sonic and Tails, the video game. That was Ryan's favorite game, and Nick just would sit there and do the little things. But Ryan actually could play the game at 5 years old. And so Todd was down there playing with them, and he built this fire. And it wasn't probably an hour after the fire was built, my youngest, Zachary, he was at the refrigerator door, his back against the refrigerator door, going like this, pounding his hand back like that. And of course, he's 16 months old. He really wasn't talking. I had just stopped breastfeeding him maybe about a month before that. So he wanted his bottle of juice. And then I couldn't feed it to him. It had to be Todd. So I called Todd up, and I said, he wants to go to bed now. It's early. It was like 7. It's early. He wanted to go to bed now. So he came upstairs and was doing that. I got the kids ready from downstairs. And by that point, my headache, I felt like I had a hole in my head. I'm not kidding you. It was fire in my whole head. They were ornery, cranky. They get 3 stories each. They get to pick out for bedtime, and I would read them 3 stories each. Todd was feeding the baby. I look in on Todd. He's completely out, holding the baby. So we put him in the crib. Todd says, I'm getting what you guys have had. I'm finally getting whatever it is that you guys have had. I don't feel good at all. Where's the sample of NyQuil? And he took a big sample of the NyQuil and went down to bed. Worst thing you could do if you have carbon monoxide poisoning in your home. So I let him, and then I tried to get the kids ready for bed, and I was a little short with them, to my regret, for the rest of my life. But I was, Mommy doesn't feel good. Mommy can't talk. We can't have stories tonight. I can't do it. I can't do it. And they're like, come on, Mommy, crying. And I'm like, no, you have to go to bed tonight. You just have to go to bed. We'll do more tomorrow. You have to go to bed. So they lay down to bed. Todd's like, I'm going down to bed. He's downstairs. Okay? We had the master bedroom was downstairs. We were building upstairs to be all on one level, but for right now, we're in the basement. The kids are upstairs. Ryan and Nick are sleeping in their single beds with a dresser in between them, just a bedside dresser. And then Zach's right across the hall. He's in his room. Zach's sleeping. Those 2 are sleeping. But it was Thursday night, and I had to watch ER and, Knots Landing or whatever it was, whatever show it was that I was watching. I had to watch it, right? And so I'm trying to stay awake. Meantime, I feel horrible. I've got a splitting headache. It's cold outside. I've got a fire in. Well, we let the fire go out down there, but the flue was still open. But I had the wood stove, and that was stoked with wood. We had a routine of how that all went in the night, in the morning, to keep it going all the time. Coals going, and then hot fire, and then tamper down and let it simmer and heat, right? So we were doing things right. But we didn't know that we had a faulty furnace. And you wouldn't know unless you had an inspection or you had one of these devices that is going to tell you, hey, something in your house is emitting something that is not right, not good. So in the meantime of all that, I'm trying to stay awake. I have diarrhea. I feel very, very sick, dizzy. But I'm determined to stay awake. And one of the things that, because I had quit breastfeeding my baby, I started smoking because I wouldn't put that in my child. So I would smoke a cigarette. So I would go outside, 30 below, winds are blowing, everything. And I'd go out on my sliding glass door. But I'd leave the door open about that much so I could hear if any of the kids woke up. And I'd stand out there and just do really quick. And then I'd come back inside, and it's like, I don't feel any better, but I don't feel any worse. So the little bit of that fresh air would keep me going until the credits ran, and I'm finally like, God dang it, go to bed. So I took myself downstairs at like 10 o'clock. Kids are upstairs. I have a baby monitor in the baby's room. I can hear throughout the night, I hear Zachary, my 16-month-old, I hear him waking up. And when he wakes up, I go up there. It's not unusual for him to wake up a time or two at night, but he was waking up, And I'd go up, and he'd maybe be standing in his crib with his arms out. And I would, feeling sick, but I would go and I'd rock him till he'd fall back asleep, and I'd lay him back in his crib. And I'd make my way downstairs. A couple of times I did that. The last time, and now I'm getting more and more and more and more poisoned, to the point where I'm not able to open my arms as much, or like the stairs were getting harder to navigate. It was bad. I was dizzy. But at 4:30ish in the morning, it was the last time I remember actually going up the stairs. I walked by the wood-burning stove, and it had two of these big dials on the door that you open wide open, you put your wood in, and then you keep the door open a little bit to get it hot, so it's burning straight up hot. And then before I would go downstairs, I would then dial them down to the point where we have them dialed down to and shut the door. And then when my husband would get up a couple hours later, he would then stoke it with more wood for when we get up later. He would go to work early in the morning. Well, I did this just by rote. I mean, I'm sick, but I'm cold. I'm very, 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 very cold. And so I put the wood in, did all that. And then as I walked by the furnace gauge, I turned it up just a little bit. The moonlight was shining from the windows that were open lakeside, and I just turned it up like 2 degrees, maybe, just a little bit, because it was so cold. The house wasn't cold. I was cold. And I went in to check on the baby, and this was maybe the 3rd time I had checked on him. This time I noticed that he was the time before that, he was sitting, facing the wall, sitting with his legs through the crib, and he was facing the opposite direction. Okay, and I thought that was weird, and all I could do, I couldn't lift him, all I could do was put him back down on his tummy, and I would pat his back, and I'd be hanging onto the crib saying, go to sleep, go to sleep. And he would be breathing, really weird breathing. But I'm poisoned, and I'm hanging onto a crib, and I can barely register the fact that he's breathing really oddly. Had I not been poisoned, my God, my alarm bells would have been ringing, and my alarm would have gone off long, long, long before that. So, of course, I walk away. I try to get back downstairs. I get downstairs. Do not close my fire wood stove. I don't close anything up. I go back downstairs, and I couldn't even make it into the bed. I passed out between the bathroom and the bedroom. I remember laying there in so much pain, in and out of consciousness. I didn't know. A lot of this I'm piecing together after the fact. But that was at like around 4:30 in the morning. At around 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Todd's work had been calling, because he's never late for work, or if he's going to be gone, it's in triplicate, and they just knew something was not right. My sisters, my mom and dad, everyone had been calling us all morning, wanting to know if we were feeling any better finally, right? And never heard the phone. But in my corn crib house that we were going to be adding additions to, adding a new furnace to, adding a new air conditioner to, all of that come spring, in that we had I lost my train of thought. With all that going on, we had enough air coming into the house because the sun was shining so brightly, and it was snow and then an iced lake, and my whole side of the house faced the lake, and it had no window coverings, and I had a triple sliding glass door and a big bay window, and it was long, and it was just enough to heat enough that it wasn't really, the furnace wasn't turning on as much. I think we had just enough air to keep us going, but I was still passed out on the floor. I guess what had happened was my husband got up trying to answer the phone, and he got out of the bed and walked along, and he fell so hard that he knocked with the back of his ear, the back of his head, he knocked the recliner chair handle. He broke that off with the back of his head. That's how hard he fell. It just kind of like, and then he got up and he was going to go answer the phone, and we had my high school record player, and it had the, you know, the covers, the grayish cover on the top of it, you know, and he just fell right on top of that, busted that all up, got on the phone, and it was his work. And they're like, and he worked for a gas and welding supply company. He's their OSHA person, so he's well versed on carbon monoxide. He inspects, okay? So, and the guy says, you know, hey, where are you? And he's like, we're sick. I don't know. And he's like, well, where's Cheryl? Where are the kids? In bed. I don't know. And he's like, go check on them. Meanwhile, when he hung up the phone, he didn't feel like that was right. Something was not right with the way Todd was talking. He wasn't making sense. And so he called 911. It started wheels in motion, right? Small town, got to get there with all the snow and the below and all that stuff. Meanwhile, he checks on one, checks on Nick, or Zach, the baby, and he said no, he knew he was gone. Then he went and checked on Nick, knew he was gone. And then he checked on Ryan, and he grabbed Ryan's feet, the edge of the bed, like this. And they were hard, you know, like everyone else. It was solid. But Ryan said, ouch, like that. And Todd was just immediately just left the room, and he went, and I don't know this timing-wise. He wanted to call 911. I think he was able to call 911, but first he called my parents, which was a phone number that he had been calling since 1976 when we first met. So he knew that phone number by heart, and it might have even been on speed dial. But he gets my dad, and he doesn't make any sense. And there's no cell phones, you got to remember. We don't have cell phones. But he calls my dad, and he's like, the boys, we need help. Dead. They're dead. Dead in their beds. You know, and my dad's like, what? What? You know, in Rochester. He's in Rochester. We're up in St. Cloud. And then Todd hangs up the phone. And he comes down to me, and I'm laying still where I had passed out. I had had diarrhea. I had thrown up. I was losing all my bodily fluids. I was not at all in any shape to think, talk, nothing. And he says, the boys are gone. And the only thing that went through my head is, oh no, they're outside without their jackets on. It's what went through my head. But my body couldn't spring to action. My body couldn't move. My arms were like this. I was curled up. My black lab, his butt was right here. And he had lost his bodily functions. And he was right there next to me. And I don't know any of this. I'm just laying there. And Todd says, they're dead, Cheryl. And that registered. And that's when you get, if you've ever heard of superhuman strength and adrenaline and just plain sheer guts, I got myself up. But I could not walk. I could not. I crawled. You know how hard it is to crawl? You've done Army crawls, all of y'all that in training and people that watch it. That is really hard to do. I couldn't do it to save my life right now. But I did. I was like crawling, trying to get up the stairs. And you can see my face was mashed up. You could see the blood from Todd and I up and down the stairwell as we're trying to get up the stairs. And I get up the stairs. I get into the baby's room, Zach's room, and I'm not even seeing clearly. All I see is like peripheral vision, just as small of amount of vision you can see. And I'm down there and I see white all around his mouth. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't, I don't know what that means. And then I lifted his shoulder to turn him over and pick him up, and he was just as hard as rock. But I didn't know he was dead. I just didn't. I just thought, okay, he's still sleeping. So I left, and I went to the boys' room, and I go to Zach, and I do the same thing. He's got this white all around him. And I'm thinking, okay, come on, Nikki, wake up, Nikki. And I take his shoulder to roll him over, and again, it was the same thing. And I hurt so bad, and I couldn't, and I didn't know what's going on. And all I could think of was, I have to just die. So I went and laid down next to Nick. I didn't even go over to Ryan. I didn't even go over to him. I laid down in bed with Nick. And I said, God, please take me right now. This hurts. I hurt. My body hurts so bad. That's carbon monoxide. Hurts. It's like the worst flu you've ever had. It's worse than flu. There's no describing it when your body is shutting down. And I laid there, I don't know how long. Not very long. It couldn't have been very long. And I hear Ryan, Mom, very faint, Mom. And again, I got that surge of adrenaline, sheer guts, sheer will. I got up, walked around to Ryan's side of the bed. I still can't do my arms. I can't open them. They're just like locked. I was so cold. And I walked over to him and I just looked at him, and he's looking up at me and he says, I can't move. I said, you have to get up. Ryan, you have to get up. You have to. I can't. So I bend over and I'm trying to pull him off the bed. So I pull him off the bed, and I can remember his legs going just clunk, clunk onto the floor. And I just dragged him out to the hallway into our big living room that has the triple sliding glass door with the sun shining down with a nice patch of sunlight on the carpet right by the sofa. And I plop him there. I go over and I open, as cold as I am, I go over there and I open that sliding glass door, about that big, not very, but enough, because I couldn't get my head. I was like, why won't my head just, I can't think, I can't do anything. And then I sat down next to Ryan, and I look over, and there's Todd on the phone sitting at the desk through the kitchen. I can see him, and he's talking to 911. I don't know. He's talking to someone, trying to talk to them, not making sense. And then in walks, there were 27 people in my house that morning. All I saw, and this is, this is how poisoned you are. Would I ever be so soiled and I was naked from here down? Would I ever let anyone in my house if I was even somewhat within my own mind? And all I saw was Ryan's bus driver that took him to every other day kindergarten and lived just down the street, small town, Kimball, Minnesota. He was also on the volunteer fire department, whatever you call all those things. And all I saw was him. And I thought I was talking normal English language, saying, "Oh, Ryan, we're okay. Your bus driver's here," and smiling. But instead, it came out, I was speaking in some gibberish tone of voice or language. I wasn't making any sense, but at that point, then everyone worked very quickly. And to finish with the morning of that afternoon, that I should say, the one thing that I remember, because now they're giving me oxygen, you know, they're starting to get us ready to put us into the AMBO, trying to figure out if they're going to go by helicopter, ambulance to get us to Hennepin County. It's an hour drive. And all I can remember is watching the two men in brown sheriff windbreakers that had yellow writing on the back, and they said coroner on them. But I didn't register coroner, I didn't register that. I just watched those two men go, one that way and one that way. And that's all I cared about at that point. Ryan's being taken care of. And I watched them. And I waited for them to bring my babies out. And I was praying so hard to bring my babies out. And I saw those two men come back, meet in the hallway where the doorway was, right there. And they were both had tears streaming down their eyes. And they each shook their head at each other like, nope, there's nothing. I still didn't know my kids were dead. I just knew that no one was doing anything, and all of a sudden they're hauling all of us off. And, you know, later, after the carbon monoxide was out of our system, you know, we had enough ambient air and we did the hyperbaric chamber. At that point, then I knew. And that's when life completely changed. And when we got out of the carbon monoxide chamber, they said, oh, we're going to bring you in the back way at Hennepin County. We're going to bring you in the back way. And I'm like, why? And Ryan's still not okay. We had to dive twice because he just couldn't handle it. But I said, why? And he said, there are so many reporters and people out front wanting to know this story. And I said, well, what's the story? You know, and it was like, well, with your children died of carbon monoxide, and I'm like, people have to know about this. Oh my God, because I am the average, I follow all the safety rules. My kids had bike helmets and the knee pads and elbow pads and a car seat, and I did all the safety stuff that a mother would do. And yet my children still died of something that I was powerless to stop. But I wasn't. I wasn't. So 2 weeks, 3 weeks I think it was, because it was Christmas, just before Christmas. Nicholas's birthday was December 28th. He was turning 4. And I'm still new at Christmas birthday so close together. And of course my husband cautioned me, you gotta, we're a stay-at-home mom, you can't be spending all this money on Christmas, and then now you got his birthday. And so I did a good job, but I really, really, really wanted to get him this truck. He wanted it so bad, and it's a Tana truck. They were plastic trucks, and then it had a little trailer with a Sea-Doo on the back. It was $24.95. He wanted that in the worst way. And I'm like, dang, I already bought everything. I have no money. I am bare bones right now. And in talking 3 weeks before Christmas, in talking with my girlfriend, whose husband was assistant manager at Walmart, her family, her brother, she drew her brother's name, lives out east. He makes $1 million, he's very, very well off. She's like, we spend $50. What in the heck am I going to get him? And she says, I think I'm going to get him 2 carbon monoxide alarms. Well, they were called detectors then, but 2 carbon monoxide detectors, because Dan just put up a display at Walmart when you first walk in. And you know, these were not heard of. These in 1996, they were not like prevalent. They weren't in my face. They were not in my face. I mean, people knew about them, but I didn't know. She says, I'm going to get him 2 of those. I'm like, that's an awesome idea. Then we had a little giggle about neighbors of ours up there that I ran into at Target, and they were buying all safety equipment, ladders, fire extinguishers, smoke alarm. Okay, kind of laughed at them because they said, every year we get a big family gift for our kids. This is our big family gift. And they were doing safety that year. And it was all that stuff for their new home. And I'm like, you know, oh, gee, wake up in the morning and you get a ladder to climb out your bedroom, you know. And here, I looked at these alarms when I went back to Walmart. I looked at them. It was $24.95, $24.90, whatever. I looked at them and I said, I can't. I have to go buy that toy truck. I will get one later. I have that toy truck and I have that Sea-Doo. I can't look at them. They're worthless to me. Had we plugged this in, my whole entire life would be so different. So I don't want anyone to experience the pain of carbon monoxide, the pain of losing any loved ones, the pain of having to live your life advocating for people to please put something simple into your home. There's laws now that say you gotta have them here, you know. Just do it and check your batteries. And I know the people, I'm constantly advocating, okay, it's battery check time, battery changing time. Do it for your smoke alarms, do it for your CO alarms. Make sure yours isn't from 1996. You know, please have an updated one because now, you know, they only have so long in life. So do that now. Do that today on your way home. If you don't have one or you know someone that doesn't have one, get them one. Part of this program can provide you one. And thank you for listening to my story. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you for attending today. I'm Assistant Fire Marshal Jason Fife with the Rochester Fire Department. As mentioned, the Rochester Fire Marshal's Office has partnered with the State Fire Marshal's Office to bring this life-saving initiative directly to the homes in Rochester. Using the data from the Minnesota Risk Assessment Tool, we've identified households that fall within the higher fire and CO risk based on things like age of house, building conditions, building construction, and other safety indicators. Through this program and the collaboration with the Rochester Community Development, we'll be installing carbon monoxide alarms in those homes free of charge. Just like other cities participating, we're focusing on residents within the city limits of Rochester, making sure the alarms reach the people who need them most. These alarms are plug-in models with a battery backup, so they'll still work even during power outages. Our goal is to install one within 10 feet of each sleeping area and make sure each level of the home is covered. Once installed, our team will then test the alarms and go over manufacturers' recommendations. The importance of this cannot be overstated. According to the Minnesota Department of Public Safety and Health, 14 Minnesotans died of carbon monoxide poisoning last year, and nearly 300 more were treated in emergency rooms. These are real families, real lives, and they're preventable tragedies. We're proud to work in partnership with the State Fire Marshal's Office to help protect our neighbors. We're committed to making sure every home in Rochester has the tools needed to stay safe. Please contact the Rochester Fire Marshal's Office at 507-328-2800 for more information. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. If you have any specific questions, we're happy to do interviews off to the side for the reporters here. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.